When I was growing up, one of the main TV networks, I think it was NBC, had a summer campaign called It's New to You. This was back in the days when new TV shows were basically only released during the school season, and they were released one at a time, and you could only watch them live. The horror. But those new to you shows were always worth watching, even if I had seen them before. This season, I'm re-releasing 9 meaningful episodes of the nearly 150 in the Graced Health podcast library. Perhaps you missed them and they're new to you, or perhaps you might find they reach you now in a different way that they did when they were initially put out there. You'll still get the new, shorter Ask the Trainer episodes, so keep tuning in on Thursdays and enjoy this one. Hey there, I'm Amy Connell. Welcome to Graced Health, the podcast for women who want simple and grace-filled ways to take care of themselves and enjoy a little chocolate in the process. I'm a certified personal trainer and nutrition coach who wants you to know your eating, movement, and body don't have to be perfect. You just need to be able to do what you're called to do. Okay, my friends. Buckle up and do yourself a favor. Take this off 1.5 speed. If you're like me, that's how you listen to your podcast. Every now and then we give you one that you want to take it off, and I'm telling you, this is it. Today, Dr. Richard Harris joins me to discuss the gut microbiome. I swear, I promise you will learn so much in this conversation, just like I did. We just jump in and dig into all things gut health. We talk about a healthy gut microbiome, what the difference is between that and gut health, the impact of stress, the impact of foods, and then the relationship that a gut microbiome has on autoimmune disease, allergies, gut and thyroid health, Alzheimer's, all kinds of stuff. I know you're not going to want to miss it. Let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Harris. First of all, you need to know he's a double doc with an MBA. So he is a board certified internal medicine physician and a pharmacist. He also has his MBA from the University of Houston. He is host of the Strive for Great Health podcast. And Dr. Harris has a client-centric view focusing on building relationships and trust through a comprehensive lifestyle medicine system combined with genetic and micronutrient testing. He currently runs an online health and wellness practice. I can't wait for you to hear about it. It's really an interesting way of doing medicine, especially right now. He's a partner in an education consulting firm. He consults for several companies. He's an avid reader, weightlifter, video game enthusiast, and author in his spare time. Dr. Harris also enjoys sports, traveling, philanthropy, church, and keto donuts. I don't think I've ever had those, but I'll just take his word for it. Real quickly, before we get to Dr. Harris, I do have a question. Do you want to break some rules with me? I would love it if you would. If you would like to break some of these so-called rules of healthy living, then head over to gracedhealth.com/bad rules and get my new free download. It combats several health rules we've heard, and then it gives you a bonus one to keep. Okay, let's bring on Dr. Harris. Dr. Harris, I'm so glad you're here with us today to talk all about gut microbiome. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, Amy, thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So I'm curious, how has your day been today? Because I feel like we're still in COVID, and I'd love to know just how your day's been.
Yeah, so for me, I try to keep my routine as simple as possible so that I do it every single day. And my routine usually starts with wake up, drink a big glass of water, meditate, pray, walk the dog, gym. So that's my morning routine, and that's what I've done so far today. And overall, today's another blessing. Every day I wake up, I feel is another blessing from God, and I'm energized for my rest of my day, which is podcast planning and meeting with some of the companies I consult for, And then I'm on the board of a charity. We have a charity board meeting tonight. So Thursdays are usually a pretty busy day for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to ask, what kind of dogs do you have or
We
dog?
have a rescue. He is German Shepherd, and we think either mixed with Boxer or Pit.
I've got a pit mix stray who literally showed up and we kept her after making sure that she didn't have any owners.
Oh,
So I
wow.
definitely have, yeah, yeah. And those German Shepherds, those are great dogs as well. My sister has some. Okay, well, I want to jump in because I really, and I have to say, I really debated about what I wanted to talk with you about. I was introduced to your podcast through a Houston podcasting network that we're both on, and you put something out on vitamin D, and I listened to that and I was like, I have got to have him on. So I kind of wanted to talk to you about vitamin D today, but what I'm going to do is recommend to all my listeners to go listen to that because I've been trying to put it out there. I've been sharing it, but you provided some great information. So just a little extra plug on that. So now we'll move into the gut health. Now, one thing you're going to have to help me with a little bit is the terminology. Gut health, gut microbiome, are those interchangeable? Is it kind of the same thing? First get me started with that.
Yeah, so we use them interchangeably, although they're a little bit different. Gut health is more of the overall comprehensive term. Like that would be the subject heading, would be gut health. But
Okay.
the preeminent factor in gut health is your microbiome. That's your bacterial diversity, what bacteria you have, how much you have. Are they the right bacteria? Are they the wrong bacteria? Are they producing the right byproducts? Are they producing the wrong byproducts? That's what we mean by the microbiome. But when you talk about gut health, there's some other things that we'll look at too. That could be digestion. That could be if there's a leaky gut, meaning that the tight junctions, the junctions between the cells have spread apart. And so the barrier function of the gut is impaired. It could be gut cell function. Are they doing what they're supposed to do? It could be the other organs in the gut, like the gallbladder. Is that working? Is the pancreas doing what it's supposed to do in digestion? So all of those things are components of gut health. But for a lot of us, it really starts with the microbiome, and that's what we focus on first.
Okay, so let's start there. The microbiome. Give us just a general overview of that and why it's important.
Absolutely. So we are just scratching the surface of the complex interactions between our gut microbiome and our bodies. They used to say that there were more bacteria in us than us. Now we say it's about equivalent. We have as much bacteria on us and in us as we have us. And there are complex interactions between our microbiome and our own physiology. For instance, a study came out last year that showed that our gut microbiome looks out for viruses. How cool is this? Like
Yeah.
literally the gut bacteria will say, "Hey, immune system, over there, there's a virus, go get it." And so we can work together to improve our health, but if you have the wrong bacteria, that can negatively affect your health. And so if you're looking at the microbiome from an overall level, okay, someone's asking, why is this important? Okay, well, it's linked to Alzheimer's. It's linked to
Hmm.
cardiovascular disease. It's linked to diabetes. It's linked to obesity. It's linked to kidney disease, depression, anxiety, liver disease. I mean, literally, we're finding links between the gut microbiome and all of these major diseases. And if you look at what's plaguing America, heart disease, there's links to that. Cancer, there's links to that. Lung disease, there's links to that. Depression, anxiety, Alzheimer's, there's links to that. Diabetes, there's links to that. So those are the major conditions that we're dealing with as Americans. And a lot of that is because of poor gut health and poor gut microbiome.
Tell me what a healthy microbiome looks like, because that's something I think it's really hard for people to get their heads around. Like, well, I mean, I have to imagine that if you asked anyone, how do you think your microbiome is? They'd probably be like, oh, it's fine, because there was probably nothing indicating that it's not. So tell me a little bit about what a healthy microbiome, how it manifests itself.
So that's a really interesting question because the honest answer is we don't know because there
Okay.
are
Well, that makes
population
me feel
different.
better.
Yeah, this is something we're still studying. We have ideas of what it should look like, but if you look at different populations from around the world, they have subtle differences in their microbiome, and that is due to differences in soil, differences in nutrient intake, differences in stress levels. I mean, all of these things are somewhat different. So there are some evidence that a microbiome of someone in South America could be completely normal, but if you had that same microbiome of someone here in America, if they had it, it could cause issues. And
Interesting.
that's because of regional variation. So, what we know now about the microbiome are there are certain species, and if they're in a relative ratio, that indicates a healthier gut. And we know that you need diversity in your microbiome. So it's like if you had a bunch of different states, like the United States, and all of them were the same, then there would be no diversity, there'd be no culture, there would be, it would be like a Stepford Wives kind of scenario, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
each state is a little different, and most people in the US don't even realize that because we haven't visited all states. But there's subtle differences in culture and food and the way people talk and all of that, even within the United States. And that's what our microbiome needs. It needs diversity. And what we're seeing is just like our bodies need to be able to balance and respond to different conditions, our gut microbiome needs to be balanced to allow it to respond to variations in our environment.
Okay. Okay. I have a lot of questions from that. But I think we'll get to those as we go in. I know you're a big believer, and I am too, that the foundation of all we do is the foods that we eat. What are some good foods to eat to promote good gut health, good gut microbiome?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best way you can promote diversity in your microbiome is eat the rainbow.
Yeah.
So you want foods from all different kinds of colors because those colors indicate what nutrients are there. The colors in foods are actually nutrients. They're
Mhm.
phytonutrients and chromophores and things like that. So each color has a different nutrient profile, and each of those nutrients has different effects in the body. So you want a diversity of foods. And it's interesting when we talk to people about this because they're like, well, I can't do that because I want to eat my favorite things and that's it. And, I don't want to stray outside. And I'm like, okay, like 80% of the average person's nutrition plan comes from 15 foods and that's it. And most people, it's like 6 foods, right? So we
Wow.
don't get enough diversity in our nutrition. We think we do, but we don't. The illusion of freedom is actually higher in most people's minds than actual freedom. So that's the best thing that you can do is eat a diversity of foods. And what I'm concerned about is, as we push towards more strict nutrition plans like carnivore and like vegan, that these are very restrictive plans. And so you're eliminating entire classes of foods, and that's going to hurt your microbial diversity. And so what you're seeing with a lot of those nutrition plans now is people recommend cycling. And I think if you're doing vegan, if you're doing carnivore, that's the best approach to help maintain microbial diversity and prevent nutrient deficiencies. Stress. You have to moderate your stress. There is evidence that stress is an absolute killer to the microbiome. And why do you think
Wow.
people with stress often have gut issues? All right. And people with gut
Yeah.
issues often have stress. You
Yeah.
see these two
Yeah.
linked, and part of that is the vagus nerve, right? The vagus nerve goes from our brain to our gut. So there's a two-way highway between the brain
Yeah.
and gut. But there's also the gut microbiome makes a lot of the precursors to our brain chemicals, our neurotransmitters. So if you have stress, you get abnormal gut bacteria. You get what we call dysbiosis, which is either abnormal bacteria or improper diversity, and that can lead to a host of chronic issues.
So that is simply from your brain communicating down to your gut. I mean,
Mhm.
and that's what just takes it off.
Right. And vice versa. Your gut communicates to your brain. So it's the gut brain axis, and it's a two-way highway. So
This
you
stuff
can't,
is so fascinating.
it really is. And we're just scratching the surface on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, we've seen a lot of practitioners will focus on healing the gut with people with stress, anxiety, depression, and their symptoms completely go away.
Really? Wow.
Hmm.
I have learned somewhere along the way that one of the ways that you can really promote a healthy microbiome is to eat, I think it was either 30 or 40 different plants a week. Does that seem consistent with what you have learned?
Right, and that's to deal with the diversity
Yeah.
of intake, because just like we have individual preferences in what we like to eat, your microbiome has individual preferences on the foods it likes to intake and digest. So by eating that diversity of nutrients and food types, you promote a healthy microbiome. Now, what's interesting, I just read this study, I think last week. It showed that your microbiome responds to what you eat. So there is a species of bacteria called biophilia, and they looked at biophilia and meat intake. So, a lot of people say don't eat meat because of TMAO, right? It's a meat, a choline, creatine byproduct from meats that's been shown to increase cardiovascular disease. Now, what this study found was that in people who eat a lot of meat and they have a healthy microbiome, the biophilia actually increases in amount, and it changes its gene expression to allow for it to digest the creatine and the choline and some of these TMA precursors that get turned to TMAO. So now that the TMA isn't absorbed into the bloodstream and you don't get TMAO. So literally your microbiome not only changed the amount of something in it, the biophilia, it also changed its function to accommodate our lifestyle. And the people who didn't do that had diseased microbiomes, and they were the ones who developed cardiovascular disease. But the ones who weren't able to do that, for their body to shift because their bodies were healthy, they had a healthy microbiome, didn't develop that risk. I thought that was remarkably interesting.
That really is. Does one have to have a healthy foundation of the microbiome for it to be able to do that? I mean, I assume that you can't just start binging out on wings, let's just say, for those, or whatever it is, if and for the microbiome to adjust if they don't already have that solid foundation ahead of time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just like anything else. The greatest predictor of how you come out of something is how you are before it.
Okay.
And we're seeing this with COVID now, right? 60% of US adults have a chronic disease, 40% have two. And so you're wondering why at one point we had 26% of the COVID cases in the world with 4% of the population. It's because our population is sick and diseased.
Yeah.
And if you have these chronic issues, it leads to dysregulation and symptoms or systems, dysregulation and immunity. And therefore, your body can't respond when it needs to respond to a foreign invader or an event. And it's the same way with the microbiome. If you have a diseased microbiome, it doesn't respond like it should to help your body keep centered and keep balanced. So, having a healthy microbiome is essential to having your body be able to respond like it should when it's dealing with some type of insult, whether that's injury or infection or something else.
Okay. Okay. I have to imagine I can probably guess the answer to this, but what about foods that do not promote a healthy microbiome?
Yeah, the main thing there is processed foods.
Yeah.
So 70%, 60, 70% of the average American's intake of food is processed food. And processed food is not food, it's food byproducts. And these
Yeah.
foods have been transformed by chemicals. If you use canola oil, guess what? Your canola oil will use gasoline to extract that oil, right? So you're getting something that's been transformed by gasoline. I personally don't want to eat anything that's been transformed by gasoline.
Yeah.
And so these foods, number one, cause inflammation in the gut. If you get inflammation in the gut, you're going to have an abnormal gut microbiome, because now your immune system is going to not be able to easily discern what is safe and normal and what is not. And it just begins attacking everything. So you'll even begin attacking the healthy bacteria. And then in a population of unhealthy bacteria or yeast or viruses or protozoa, like all these other things that are in our gut system, now they can become opportunistic and take over, because a good bacteria keep them in check. So if you eat a lot of processed food, that inflammation causes changes. Also, sugar by itself can cause this. There's a study that came out this a couple weeks ago that showed that sugar wreaks havoc on your microbiome, destroys the good flora, is taken up by the bad bacteria, And then they use it to make chemical warfare. Literally, there's chemical warfare happening in your gut right now between the good
Wow.
bacteria and the bad bacteria. And if you feed the bad bacteria, they'll win. But if you feed the good bacteria, they'll win. And so processed foods, excess sugar intake, and those are the two main things. And then high carbohydrate intake as well. So again, most Americans eat way too many carbs. 60-70% of the average American's dietary intake is carbohydrates.
Hmm.
And that causes some adverse changes in the gut as well. And that's why we've seen people who go to low carb nutrition plans and they've helped heal their gut that way. So those are the really three main things I see that people are doing that adversely affect their gut.
Okay. Wow. How does it, there's a lot of autoimmune issues out there. How does the gut affect that one way or the other?
Without question, it does. If you look at blue zones, these places that live long and have no chronic disease, if you ask a person, hey, who's going to live longer, an American or some tribe in the middle of the jungle in Africa? They're going to say the Americans, of course. No, there are tribes in the jungle in Africa who live longer than we do, have no chronic disease. They literally die of old age.
Hmm.
And if you look at their biomarkers are incredible. And one of the things that they don't have is they don't have any autoimmune disease. And autoimmune disease has become a common thing now where it used to be very rare. And one of the main reasons is gut inflammation. So if you're doing those things we just talked about and you get gut inflammation, that inflammatory signal gets transmitted throughout the body. So the gut will say, hey, we're inflamed. Liver picks that up, says, okay, gut's inflamed. We need to be on the lookout. Then the liver sends signals everywhere. And then your brain says, oh my gosh, the gut's inflamed. We need to be on the lookout. And because of that, you get a dysregulated immune system. And then the immune system begins to lose its ability to determine self from non-self. What is me? What is not harmful? What is harmful? And then it begins to just attack different structures. And some of that could be related to what we call molecular mimicry, meaning if you get abnormal gut bacteria and the body's trying to fight it off, some of the outsides of those cells look like our own natural products. And so the immune system can make things to attack that bacteria and then inadvertently attack itself. So that's one of the reasons. The other reason is that dysregulated immune system and inflammation, to where now our immune system's not functioning properly. And depending on your genetics and your environment, that could lead to autoimmune disease.
Okay. All right. So if someone is struggling with autoimmune disease, may I assume, or I guess correct me if I'm wrong, that your recommendation would kind of be going back to those basics. Eat a diverse foods, plant heavy with the rainbow. I mean, is that kind of the first line of defense for that?
It is, in general, someone with autoimmune disease, I'm thinking, what is setting this off and what is triggering it?
Yeah.
Could it be toxins? Could it be the gut microbiome? Could it be stress? And so you might have to do a little bit more of an in-depth workup, because they may be eating healthy foods that may also be triggering that inflammation. So a lot of times what we'll do in that situation is do a test that looks at, okay, how your body responds to certain foods. Is that causing inflammation? And so what we'll do is we'll put them on like a 10 or 14 day nutrition plan that's based upon the foods from that test that we know are not causing inflammation or reactions, to allow that inflammation to go down in the gut, and then you slowly expand it. So that's something that we routinely do with people with autoimmune disease. You also will do comprehensive microbiome testing to see if there's inflammation, if there's problems with digestion, what bacterial species are predominant, and do we need to give some support to help there?
Okay.
And are we seeing abnormal immune system activation as well? Could that be allergic or inflammation? So these are all the things that we begin to work on. But one of the oldest and simplest cures for autoimmune disease, and this is something that there's data on this, but you'll see very few conventional docs do, is they used to tell people, take a little bit of sodium bicarbonate.
Oh,
And
really?
it's not to alkalinize the blood. That's not the effect there. The effect is sodium bicarbonate sends an everything's okay signal in the gut. because your stomach acid is around the pH of like 1, so it's very acidic. But when you get into the first part of the colon, the pH is like 7. So that reason for that is because um, you would get bicarbonate release from the organs in the gut to help with digestion of food, and to help prevent damage from that high pH in the stomach. And so once you see that bicarbonate signal in the intestines, that sends a DNA signal, a chemical signal that says everything's okay, and it decreases inflammation. So this is a simple tool that I've used with people a lot. Just tell them take a little bit of sodium bicarbonate with like a protein shake or whatever,
Oh, really?
and
So
you
what
can
does a
see
little
gut
bit mean?
inflammation.
How much, like, yeah, tell me how that would, how you recommend people take that.
Depending on the person, depending on what's going on, like if you're already on acid blockers and things like that, you don't want to take this at first because
Yeah.
you're already worsening the pH problem in your stomach. But if you're not, then I'll tell people take like an eighth of a teaspoon once a day, twice a day, depending on the situation. I do an eighth of a teaspoon once a day before my workouts, because you can actually use sodium bicarbonate as a pre-workout. It helps prevent lactic acid buildup in the muscles.
Oh, that's really interesting. I've got a bunch of athletes at my house. So that's really interesting. So just an eighth of a teaspoon. Well, that's really
Hmm.
easy to get in. I mean, I figured you were going to say like, oh, a teaspoonful. I actually just was, I would love your thoughts on this. Someone was saying that she takes a shot of apple cider vinegar
Hmm.
with baking soda in it every morning, kind of in a fasted state. What are your thoughts on that? Because that was
That's a
interesting. I hadn't heard the two combined.
That's a really smart person who's doing
Oh
that.
yeah.
So there are benefits to apple cider vinegar. Most people go overboard. You don't need more than a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar with meals to reap some of those effects on blood sugar and metabolism. But apple cider vinegar is an acid.
Uh-huh.
So if you're having problems already with, acid reflux or heartburn or things like that, that can sometimes make things a little bit worse. And so taking the bicarbonate helps with the acidity there, but you also still get some of the benefits of the apple cider vinegar, especially if you're using, with the mothers, which is a good source of natural probiotics.
Mhm.
So that's a great combination for overall health and maintenance of your gut.
Oh, that's really interesting. Okay, I'm gonna have to. I heard that and I was like, I don't know, that kind of sounds weird, but I'll try it. I'll give it a shot. This is actually more of a personal question. I suffer from a lot of allergies, and um, I have been able to identify some things that have really exacerbated it, which is really frustrating because it's things like onions and like normal foods that I know where they came from. How is there any kind of relationship with that? I have a feeling that you're going to say the answer is yes, because it seems like the microbiome drives so much. But is there a relationship with allergies and your overall gut health?
Yes, absolutely. So if you have a lot of dysregulation in your microbiome and your gut, it can make you more prone to have allergies like asthma. There's a dysbiosis associated with asthma and lung issues. And there's a gut lung axis. There's a study that came out that showed that we actually have a microbiome in our lungs. And that was mind blowing because for the longest time, we thought the lungs was a sterile environment. And there is a microbiome in the lungs, and it communicates with the microbiome in the gut. So just like
Wow.
they communicate, the microbiome in your sinuses and in your mouth communicates with the microbiome in your gut as well. Just like our cells communicate with each other, the microbiome communicates with each other and communicates with our cells. So if you have abnormal gut microbiome, it can cause inflammation in your sinuses. It can cause inflammation in your mouth. And so you can get worsening allergies because of that.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Can you define dysbiosis? Did I say that right?
Dysbiosis.
Dysbiosis. Sorry, my handwriting is terrible here. Tell
Yeah.
me a little bit
So
about what that is.
so dysbiosis can mean really two practical things. Number one, that you have an abnormal microbiome, and that could be either too much of something, too little of something. It could be that's the wrong something.
Okay.
that's what dysbiosis really means. And that is something that it is common and something that we have to fix in a lot of people who have chronic disease.
Okay, got it. And sorry, I'm kind of all over the place because I've been making notes as we go. What are your thoughts on gluten and its relationship with the microbiome?
Yeah. So if you look at the medical literature, there is, of course, gluten sensitivity with celiac disease, right?
Right.
That's a well documented medical condition where people get a lot of inflammation in their gut with gluten. Now, what a lot of providers think don't exist, but it actually does exist, is non celiac gluten sensitivity. And I'm one of those people. I don't have celiac disease. I've tested for it. I don't have it, but my gene profile indicates that, hey, I might be susceptible to gluten inflammation. And I actually figured this out before I even did any of the testing when I was 18. And I stopped eating bread, and a lot of my GI symptoms went away or improved.
Yeah.
And now if I try to eat bread, I can have like 2 bites. If I have more than 2 bites, I'm immediately bloated and have all other types of symptoms like irritable bowel. So gluten sensitivity is a real thing. A lot of people who have it, it may not be gut issues. Gluten sensitivity is linked to thyroid problems as well. So these are some of the things that we may try with people if they don't want to do the testing, and say, hey, just cut out gluten for 3 weeks, see how you
Mhm.
feel.
Yeah. Um, and when you talk about testing, this is something, tell me a little bit about that process.
hmm Yeah, so there's usually, if I'm looking at gut health, I'm thinking of um, two overall tests, and one of them is a comprehensive GI eval. It's looking at inflammation. It's looking at markers of digestion. It's looking at the bacterial diversity. What bacteria are there? Are there parasites there? Are there yeast overgrowth? What's going on with the gut in those terms? And then the other one would be that mediator release test. And that's looking at, is there an allergic reaction or inflammatory reaction happening to certain foods? And just like there's a lot of great benefits to onions. Onions are one of the main sources of quercetin in our diet. Quercetin is an incredibly powerful antioxidant. But there are some people who are sensitive,
Yeah.
and that's not an uncommon sensitivity for people to have, is onions. Tomatoes and all the other nightshades is another one. And some of these foods have great healthy properties, but sometimes you're not going to know unless you really listen to your body and take really good, what I call, health inventories about how your body reacts to certain things. Or if you can do the mediator release test to take a look and see, hey, yeah, you're actually showing that this food is causing some inflammation. And it can actually change. Sometimes people will say, you know what, I didn't eat this for a while and it used to bother me. Now it doesn't bother me. Or it could be a dose response. If you can eat those foods, but if you overeat them, then it causes a problem. And so some of this is trial and error. It's learning how your body responds. The testing is really, to me, a guideline to get a baseline understanding. But then it's not a set in stone kind of thing. The body's so complex that we may have to do a little trial and error, even if the testing points us in a direction.
Okay. And are these blood tests or fecal tests?
It's a fecal test for the stool test, and then fecal test for the stool test. Go me.
That's all right.
So yes, that's a stool test, and then the other one is a blood test for the mediator release test. It's super simple. You just ship the kit to people, my clients, and then they can go to any lab test now or other blood draw stations, get the blood drawn, and then the results come back to me.
Okay. Okay. That's fascinating that you can do that. I've had, from an allergy perspective, I've had the skin prick test, but that was like 10 years ago. And my body's changed since then. Okay. Back to gut health. I know that there's been a lot of new research coming out surrounding gut health and Alzheimer's, which is fascinating. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and what we need to know?
Yeah, I just posted a study on this on my YouTube channel. Really great study. It looked at the microbiome and it looked at microbiome products. So just like our cells have byproducts, our microbiome makes things as well. And one of the important things that our microbiome makes, and this is probably, besides ketones, my favorite molecule is butyrate, which is also a ketone body, but it's a little bit different than beta hydroxybutyrate. But butyrate is a wonderful molecule, and it's made by our gut bacteria, especially the Firmicutes species of gut bacteria. And so butyrate has shown to be trophic to our gut. Our gut cells take it up, use it as energy. They love it. It helps with the barrier function of the gut. Butyrate's also anti-inflammatory. It tells our immune cells, hey, this is okay. So it helps regulate our immune cells. And that butyrate gets into our bloodstream and then circulates to our brain as well. And it does the same things there. So we have a species of immune cells in our brain called microglial cells. And microglial cells are kind of the watchdogs in our brain. They kind of circulate, look for inflammation, look for abnormal things in our brain. New research has shown that the plaques, the amyloid plaques in Alzheimer's, are antimicrobial. They aggregate to help fight off infection. And so Alzheimer's is a response to our body trying to protect itself. But if the body's dysregulated, that response goes too far. And one of the things that's linked to that is our microbiome. If you have low butyrate levels, then you have increased levels of what we call cytokines. These are inflammatory messengers. These are how our immune system talks to each other. And you have cytokines that cause inflammation and cytokines that reduce inflammation. And what can happen is if you have low butyrate levels, you get increased level of cytokines that cause inflammation. And the study also showed that people who had low butyrate had more amyloid plaques deposited in their brains. So this is a direct link. It was an observational study, so I can't say, it's a cause, right?
Okay.
The correlation does not imply causation, but it's further evidence that shows that our gut microbiome impacts our brain health, and protecting your microbiome can protect your brain from Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's rates are supposed to triple by 2050. That's going to be devastating, absolutely devastating. I had 2 grandparents pass away from complications related to Alzheimer's. It is devastating for the person. It's devastating for the family.
Yeah, it's horrible. I'm sorry. That's fascinating. I almost need I need a chart. I need a flow chart of that. I'm going to have to go back and listen to that. Okay. So hopefully by now, including myself, but my listeners are like, okay, I really need to make sure that I've got a good, healthy gut. And like you said, going to the diverse foods, the rainbow of foods. But if someone feels like they need to supplement, what should they look for in a supplement?
Yeah, so it's interesting. There are times to supplement and there are times to not. So some people will tell me, I tried a probiotic and it made my symptoms worse. I'm like, you have dysbiosis. Because if you have dysbiosis or SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, sometimes taking a probiotic makes the problem worse, because the problem is you have too much bacteria. Now you're adding more bacteria, and that can make the problem worse. So sometimes those people, we have to use either pharmaceuticals or herbals to decontaminate the gut to drive down those numbers. And then you help them balance with products. But I'm a fan in general of the spore-based probiotics if you need to take a probiotic. And the reason for that is the spore-based probiotic.
You'll tell me about what a spore-based, I don't know what that means.
Okay. So species of bacillus bacteria, they live in the soil. And so they reproduce by making spores. And these spores are like some of the toughest substances on the planet. So if you take like a lactobacillus probiotic, which is very popular, those probiotics, the bacteria gets killed in the gut from the stomach acid. But they still have benefit because your body will recognize the DNA fragments and cell fragments and things like that, and it causes changes in gene expression. So those type of bacteria do have benefit, and there are multiple studies that show that, but they don't survive to get into the intestines. So if you're trying to change the intestinal milieu, if you're trying to change that dysbiosis, you want to use a spore-based probiotic, because you ingest the spores, they survive in the stomach, and then they grow into the bacteria in the intestines. And so a lot of people will use these, especially the bacillus products. One of my favorites is Megaspore Biotic. It's a really, really good probiotic. And then these spore forming probiotics make butyrate. So they help the gut repair. They help with the dysbiosis. Butyrate's also used by the microbiome as a weapon because it does have some toxic properties to some bacteria. So it's an overall gut regulation type of product.
Okay.
And then, if you have dysbiosis or if you don't want to take a product, then just use the fermented foods, kefir, however you pronounce it, kombucha, sauerkraut, kimchi. These are all the natural sources that we used to use to get some soil-based bacteria and healthy probiotics for, thousands and thousands of years. That's what we used. And then sometimes people will need a good prebiotic too. And I use Mega Prebiotic myself because I've had a lot of gut issues over the years. I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but I got a really bad case of colitis when I was 8, and I had gut issues ever since then. And then I got another case of colitis when I was 16, and it just further made the gut issues worse. When I started college, I used to spend probably about 4 nights a week in my dorm room bed, doubled over in abdominal pain. It got that bad, and I would just have severe bloating and diarrhea and constipation. But all these things that we talked about are literally what has made me symptom-free 99.9% of the time.
Wow.
So a good prebiotic can help.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure living the college lifestyle, if yours was anything like mine, it probably did not include 40 plants a week.
Right. I didn't even eat any vegetables at all in college.
No,
what's a vegetable?
Yeah.
Is pizza a vegetable?
Yeah. Exactly. Tomatoes in the sauce.
Right.
Oh, yes. We all evolve with our eating. That's for sure. Okay. Can you settle a dispute in my family?
Mm-hmm.
The legal term is not leading the witness. So I'm going to try and say this where it's a blank statement, but is the term gut brain a real thing?
Yes, absolutely. So you have a complex of nerves around your gut that are autonomously functioning without signals from your brain. So,
okay.
A lot of people will call it the second brain. A lot of people will call it the gut brain, but there is a complex system of nerves in your gut because your gut always has to be functioning and it has to function autonomously. Yes, there are inputs from the brain into the gut and vice versa, but there are autonomous inputs. And so that system can get dysregulated, just like your brain nervous system can get dysregulated, but you can also do things to help heal it. And again, one of the most powerful things to help heal your gut is controlling stress. Because if you're sending alarm signals down from your brain to your gut, then that signal is going to propagate all throughout the gut. And if you want to heal your gut, doing things like breath work and meditation will also help the nerves change their function in the gut as well.
Wow. That's fascinating. Also, I win. I'm going to have to have them listen to this. Okay, that's great. So I know we're coming up on the end of our time and I want to honor your time, but is there anything we have not covered? I feel like you've touched on a lot and I wish I could dig in more to some of it, but is there anything that we have not covered that you wish people knew?
So I always like to give people practical tips whenever I in my podcast. So I'm going to leave people with 2 practical tips that you can start doing today to improve your gut health that cost you nothing.
Perfect.
Fast and meditate. They literally cost you nothing. It costs you nothing not to eat, to skip a meal. It costs you nothing to do some meditation and breath work. And both of these things can help improve the function of your gut. So most people don't realize that it takes 2 to 4 hours for food to transit through your stomach, 6 to 8 hours to transit through your intestines. So if you're eating, every 5 hours or so, 4 hours while you're awake, you literally always have food in your stomach. It doesn't give your stomach and your intestines time to rest. So by fasting, you give their digestive system a time to rest, to offload the digestive system, to help it kind of sense and see what's going on. Also, your body can't repair and grow at the same time. They're two different cellular signals. And so if you're always in the fed state, your body is like grow, 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 store, 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 because we have the genes of people who grew up in a very hypocaloric, meaning not enough calorie world. Now we live in a hypercaloric, on average about 500 calories more a day than we actually need world. And so those signals are going to be there to grow and store if you're constantly in the fed state. But if you fast, it sends signals to your body to repair, see what's working, what's not working, kill off the stuff that's not working, help and grow the stuff that is working. And so that's important. And then meditation's actually been proven to change the way your nerves work. You want to get smarter? Meditate. You want to have less anxiety and stress? Meditate. And it literally changes your brain structure and it changes your brain function. And this has been proven. If you don't believe me, go look at the studies. They're there. And I believe, I haven't read any studies on this in the gut. I'm not aware if it's there, but if it's changing the way our brain nerves are functioning and working, it's going to change the way the gut nerves are working and functioning as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Can you define fasting for me? Because everybody has a little bit different definition of that.
Yeah, so there's fasting versus time restricted eating. All right. So most people, when they say they're fasting, they're doing time restricted eating, which means, I eat for in an 8-hour window a day and I fast the other 16, which is perfect. Everyone can do that. There are some people who shouldn't. Some people do better off with a 12-12 window. That's fine. Just have a window where you're not eating and schedule it. And then to me, a true fast involves going into ketosis, to where your body has burned through all the stored sugar in our bodies and starts to burn through stored fat. And for most people, that can take somewhere between 16 to 24 hours. So I recommend that people do a long fast if applicable. There's certain people who shouldn't, like certain medications and disease states and things like that. Discuss it with your provider. But I recommend my clients that they do a long fast at least once a month, and that's at least 24 or 36 hours without food to really drive that repair process.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay, how can people connect with you? And can you tell us a little bit about your business? Because I think what you've got going is brilliant. And I think that there's a real need for people, and I'm just going to say it, particularly among men who don't want to take the time to go to their providers.
Sure.
Face to face.
Men are horrible about this. Most of my listeners are actually women, which is, most healthcare podcasters and content creators, it's the same thing. Like 70% of my audience is women. And then they're going to their husbands or significant others and being like, you need to do this. Right. Which is fine. Yeah.
I'm raising my hand over here. Yep.
Men, step up. You are leaders. You are providers. If you want your family to be healthy, set the initiative, set the role, be the leader, be out front, the one who's guiding your family towards wellness. And so my business, it's gone through several iterations, but what I've settled upon now is a 3-step process. And step 1 is information, because there's a lot of information that we need about what's healthy, because the mainstream media and mainstream medicine doesn't really know how to keep you healthy. They just want to put everybody on pills. So I have to give a lot of information to help you. And then step 2 is plan. So I don't give people a plan. I don't believe in giving people a plan. If you want a 5-day or 2-week plan, I'm not the guy for you. The reason is I don't think they work for long term. I'm about sustainability. I want everyone to live to 95 years old and be healthy, right? Yeah. And truly die from old age, just like these blue zones. That's my goal. And so after I give the information, the next visit is, what's your plan? And if you don't have a plan, then I say, okay, come back to me when you have a plan. And then we work on the plan together, because I want to meet people where they are and help grow them, because I know that the journey to wellness is going to take years, because mine's taken years. Right. And I continually just add on, new behavior, new mindset, new tool over time. But I didn't just wake up and have this set. So I just help people transition over to a progressive wellness journey and create a plan along the way. And then step 3 is act. And the action can be carrying out the plan. It could be doing some of the advanced testing that we talked about so we could fine tune the plan. But I think that the lifestyle portion is the most important part about wellness. And so that's what I focus on primarily is lifestyle, and then also on customized supplementation. So that's a big part of my program as well. And then how can you get a hold of me? You can check out my website. My business is called Great Health and Wellness. My website's theghwellness.com. I put a lot into my podcast. That's what I'm focused on right now. The Strive for Great Health podcast. It's on all major platforms. And you can always shoot me an email. I try to respond to all my emails and point people in the right direction. Even if it's not working with me, I'm going to try to get you to someone who can help you. Because I always tell my clients, I don't do this for the money. I have other sources of revenue. I literally don't need the revenue I make from my clients. I'm there to help those who want to get help and to seriously make a change. And if that is you, I'm here. I will support you, or I will get you to someone who's more in line with your goals.
Yeah, I love that. And I have to say, I can tell you put a lot of research and time and energy into your podcast. I mean, I totally nerd out at all of this stuff. And I think it is fascinating, which I feel like I've really overused that word today. So I apologize, but you do great work. I'm really grateful that I was introduced to you, because just in my own personal life, you're really teaching me a lot. So thank you. Thank you for the time that you put into that. Okay, I have two more questions real quick. One, which is nothing like any of the other questions that I have. And this is something I've been asking a lot of my guests lately. I'm fascinated by tattoos because I think that oftentimes they tell an interesting story or a meaningful story. So I'm wondering if you have any, and if you would like to share a meaning behind one. And if not, if you had to get one, what would you get and where would you put it?
So I actually don't have any tattoos. It's kind of interesting. My sister has I think 300 hours of work. She's tatted
Whoa.
all up, and I have no tattoos, no piercings. And it's funny you mentioned that. So for the longest time, we thought my grandmother, my dad's mom, was half Choctaw Indian. And so me and my dad had talked about getting a Choctaw symbol tattooed.
Mm-hmm.
And then we come to find out, doing the genealogy, she wasn't half Indian, she was half Irish.
Interesting.
Right. Right. So I'm like,
Okay.
oh my gosh, I'm so glad I didn't get that tattoo. So my dad and I have talked about possibly doing something that's like an Irish symbol.
Uh-huh.
But we haven't decided on anything yet. I got to be 100% sure. If I'm going to put it on my body.
Yeah. Well, that's I don't have one either. I've never wanted one. I've never felt the need for it, but I've had some really meaningful conversations with people when they share that with me, because oftentimes people put a lot of thought into it before they do that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then, secondly, I know you are a man of faith, and, and that drives everything that you're doing. Do you have a meaningful Bible verse that you'd like to share with us?
I usually will go to, and I don't remember what verse. I'm terrible about remembering what
Yeah,
the
I
verse
am too.
is. But the basics are saying, God didn't give us a spirit of fear, but gave us the power of a sound mind.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and so I think that's so important, especially in this day and age, because there's so much fear and so much anxiety. And to piggyback on that quote, another quote from William James says, our best defense against anxiety is our ability to switch one thought for another. And if you sit there and think about it, that concept is so powerful because, biologically, there's so much power in your mind. Optimists live longer. They have less chronic disease.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just in your head. The thoughts in your head have physical manifestations in your hormones and your biological function. And so that's something that I go back to often, is when I start to feel, negative thoughts come in my head, I put a gate. I use some cognitive behavioral therapy techniques and I switch them over to a positive thought. And that's made a tremendous difference in my outlook, in my mindset, and in the success I'm having.
That's great. Yeah, it's amazing how interconnected everything is, and I love that verse. Yeah, that I wish I know which verse you're talking about. I'm going to go through and look it up. I'll put it in the show notes. But I don't know which one it is off the top of my head either, but I know what you're
Hmm.
talking about. Okay, Dr. Harris. So first of all, the listeners need to know that you on my pre-interview form, I said, what do you want to be? How do you want to be addressed? And you said Richard. And I'm like, no, 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 no. You can't have two doctorates and an MBA and not be called doctor by me, at least. Um, your work is fantastic. Um, I think it's changing lives, and I am really excited to get you out there. I know I have a lot of my community that really digs this kind of stuff, and so I want to encourage you guys to go check out the Strive for Great Health podcast. Go to the website. I've got that all in the show notes. And thanks for coming on. You're great.
Oh, thank you, Amy, for having me. I appreciate you. And before we started this, we actually prayed together, and I think that's so important to be healers, to put your faith out there. And if you're listening, if you are someone who's in healthcare, don't be afraid to show your faith. I tell patients when I work in the hospital and I'm praying for them, and even the people who aren't believers light up. They love that someone is investing that type of care, that type of thought, and that type of love in them. So go forth and be the change you want to see in the world.
I love it. Amen. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amy.